everyone, you're with Christine and Ask Your Angels, and tonight's show is UFOs and crop circles. We are not alone, and we're joined with special guest Michel Deschamps. And thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So Michel, how did you start on this journey of researching UFOs and crop circles?
This goes back when I was in the 6th grade, and back then a TV show called Project UFO was on the air, and that was the first time I heard the term flying saucer, or even the French variation of it too. And so I thought, well, I don't even know if it was something guiding me or whatever, but all of a sudden I decided, you know what, I'm just going to pick a topic and study it as much, as in-depth as I could possibly do. And that's when the term flying saucer came up, and I thought about it. And to be absolutely honest with you, I did not know what I was getting myself into.
Well, you've certainly done a lot of research on the subject, and we're going to cover that tonight. I just want to let our viewers know that you're with Ask Your Angels. And just for tonight's show, we're going to ask if you can please keep your questions until the end of the show. Tonight's show will mostly likely run a little bit longer than usual. We have a lot to cover, so if you could do that for us, that would be great. So talking about crop circles, what do you attribute to being the source of crop circles?
I believe it's some kind of intelligence behind them, and I'm not talking man-made either. Originally, when people started seeing these things appear in their fields, they weren't sure what to make of them. And then after a while, they had these two old gents by the name of Doug and Dave who claimed to have made them since 1978. But I actually have a news clipping that dates back to 1963, where they had found a perfectly round circle in a field of barley. And so, and I knew right off the bat that this could not be necessarily man-made. It left a big question mark there for myself.
So is that, to your knowledge, when the first crop circle was discovered, or does it go further back than that?
I believe they probably go further back, but 1963 was the first clipping I ever seen of mentions of that. And then, of course, in the late 80s is when they started to, excuse the pun, crop up in England. And then I personally thought it was a British phenomenon, but then reports started spilling in from British Columbia, elsewhere in Europe, and it's been going on ever since.
So would you say that's about 50 years of research?
I would say I think it took a little while for researchers in the crop circle phenomena area to start looking at it in that sense. Sometimes when you see something, you need to see it repeatedly before you actually think that there's something worth investigating. Mm-hmm. And I guess the circles way back when were very plain and simple, not at all like the complexity of some of the formations or a lot of the formations that you find today. And so I'm glad that they finally awoke to noticing that there's something highly unusual taking place. And I'm still a little bit miffed sometimes at the way they catalog things. I wish they did a better job of cataloging area, location, date, time, year. But, you learn by trial and error, like in everything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've looked on your website, and certainly for certain sightings you've had, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but you've certainly done a great job of cataloging your sightings. So, and actually...
it took me a while to figure out. See, the website actually was an idea for a book, but not knowing exactly how I was going to lay the book out, somebody suggested, well, use all the news clipping research that you've done at the local archive at the university and create a website out of that. And so it spawned from that. It took me 2.5 years, for instance, just to research the Sudbury Star, and I found over 350 clippings. And then I sporadically looked in the other 4 Northern Ontario newspapers that are there at the university. I didn't quite do the thorough job, because if I calculate it took me 2.5 years to do the Sudbury Star, it would probably in total would take me another 9 years to do the other 4 papers. I only went from 1947 up to December of 1989, because after a while the clippings were becoming very rare, far in between, and so I cataloged it as best as I could, and that's where the idea for the website came.
Well, I certainly think it would make an amazing book, and I think I've mentioned to you I could see it as one of those big tabletop books,
yeah.
with all the photos, and you could call it a tabletop book because people will be talking about it.
yeah.
That's my save. So the crop circles that people have found, are they unique, or have there been duplicates of any of them?
As far as I can tell, they've pretty well been unique. Some patterns seem to have been completed in consecutive nights. But I've seen some similarities in crop circles, for instance, with old pagan symbols, for instance, like crescent moons. The Tree of Life, I think, was one particular crop circle pattern. I had done a presentation before linking crop circles to ancient pagan symbols, and who knows, I mean, they've been around, whoever they are, the creators of the crop circles, and possibly the pilots of UFOs. They've been around a long, long time, so to me there's something there. And but the duplicate, it's the same as with UFO sightings. It's very rare that we actually find a duplicate objects being reported. But who's to say? You know, I'm not looking for similarities like that. Usually it's just, but after a while it becomes so consistent, the report themselves, that maybe there's a duplicity in that sense, but not in the patterns themselves.
Okay, and whereabouts, Michelle, are they found? Like, is it all over the world? Where would people most likely find them?
Obviously, England seems to be the main area where they do occur, and have been occurring since the very beginning. But I have wanted to bring the attention to the fact that there's been crop circles found in the Netherlands, in Yugoslavia, South America, I'm not so sure yet. I think there have been a few. Norway, Finland, Canada, of course, the States. Not as elaborate as the patterns found in England, but in some cases they've had just as many oddities about them as the British circles have had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, last week we were actually showing a crop circle. It was a bee. I think I'd mentioned that to you.
Yeah. Some of them look like spermazoa or caterpillars or some type of insects, birds. I'm not exactly sure what it means. Obviously something is trying to tell us something, but maybe we're just basically just starting to scratch the surface as to what they're trying to tell us.
Mm-hmm. So are there a lot of UFO sightings where crop circles show up? Like, is there some sort of significance between the two?
UFO sightings, I would say yes, except that the thing that's seen the most often with crop circles are these tiny balls of light. I'm not even sure myself if they're actual living beings of some type, or as I would put it, maybe a heavenly pencil that actually sketches out the crop circles. But then again, I've seen pictures or video where the lights don't exactly go everywhere where the pattern is laid down, but they seem to swoop over the field, and then the pattern is, it's almost like it's pre-thought by whoever's creating them, and the balls swoop over the fields and the crop circles laid down. I don't know what these little balls of light are, but they've obviously been captured on several videotapes, and they could be just remotely controlled pencils or what, you know, I don't know, creation devices that actually will generate the crop circle patterns in the fields. I'm not sure. I wish I knew the answers, and if I had the answers, I guess I wouldn't be doing the research.
Well, maybe you'll get there one day for sure. So obviously there's some people that do try to recreate a crop circle, or I mean, how would you determine if one is a hoax? And if somebody were to do that, how do you think they could go about doing it?
Well, Doug and Dave, when it first came out, the story of Doug and Dave, they basically demonstrated how they created the circles, or how they think they would, led people to believe that they created the circles by using boards and ropes. Now, the problem with that, the immediate problem with that, is that it would cause damage in the plants. In normal crop circles, pattern formations, the harvest can still take place after the plants have been laid down. There's no damage to the plants. There's no footprints, handprints, cigarette butts, things, telltale signs that you'd see if people were going to spend hours on end
Beer
creating
bottles.
these elaborate patterns that are so vast and large that it would take an entire army of people to create these things, not just two old gents with ropes and boards. In a particular crop circle pattern, let's say in Alberta, I think it was Alberta, Saskatchewan, they found a squished porcupine that got caught in the middle of the process of the crop circle. Now, unless you have Dr. Doolittle going in there and talking to the porcupine and say, could you please lay down so I can just simply walk over you with my board and my ropes? I don't see it happening. Whatever is forming this is not man-made, and it's not man. And maybe leading to your next question is how many of these are genuine and how many of these are not. I would say that the hoaxing itself is less than 1%. The majority of the crop circle patterns are genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
And you have to look at the evidence. It took them a while. It took the researchers, the crop circle researchers, a while to actually look at the molecular structure, to see if there are any changes in the plant. And not only that, but they have found a lot of oddities that just would raise a lot of questions and say this is just not possible that it's man-made. There's no way.
Now, one of the oddities, we were talking on the phone the other day, and it does it not change the energy field in the area?
There's some kind of energy field emanating from the crop, some of the crop circles. I'm not sure if it's all crop circle patterns, but in some cases, mechanical devices have stopped functioning. Cell phones will work outside of the crop circle, but once you bring the cell phone inside the crop circle, the signal will go dead. Same thing with the tractor approaching the crop circle, the tractor will all of a sudden stop. Just weird things. Animals won't approach certain crop circles. It's like there's an energy field emanating from the circle that either makes them nauseous. It's made some people nauseous. Some people don't feel anything at all. They go there and they have a meditation. They meditate and they have some kind of experience. But it's really, really weird. It's not something that could be produced by man. Whether you make the plants magnetized, for instance. In some cases, the plants have been magnetized, and plants are not any kind of metal. It's organic. How could something like that be magnetized all of a sudden? How could the molecular structure of the plants be totally aligned down to the molecular structure? I've seen certain pictures where the atoms have been changed or oriented in a different pattern than the normal crop. That's what they do. Is they do certain sampling. They do controlled sampling, and they take samplings from the patterns themselves, and they're shipped off to be studied. And I'm glad that actual science is being done.
Mm-hmm. So they're being very thorough. That's good.
Yeah.
And for the energy field, then, these things that happen, do they change over time? Like, the crop circles there, they notice these things. Does it stay that way forever, or does it change?
No, I think after a while everything dissipates. I suppose it's like, we'll cover physical trace cases later on, but there's certain changes that occur at the moment of impact, let's say, or creation, and I don't even know how long it takes for crop circles to come back to back to normal. But like I said, the harvest is still being done. The plants are not irradiated where it would be too dangerous for people to consume. would last. I don't think it lasts very long. But we'll talk about that when we talk about physical trace cases, because I've got an interesting case that I investigated myself, and I found the effects very, very unusual. But they, 3 years later, they dissipated, and then there was nothing abnormal about the area. So maybe the same happens with crop circles.
Okay, so you know that there's people out there, storm chasers, they go after all the tornadoes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most of that is due to research, but for crop circles, is there any financial reward for people who discover them? Like, is there a group that goes out?
Not really. It's mostly a headache for the farmers, because initially they think that by people trampling all over the fields to look for these things, or at least once they found them, for a while there, I think farmers would benefit, because they were charging a certain amount of money for people to visit their fields, because we're talking about their livelihood. And but no, for any researchers of any type, for any aspect of this phenomenon, there's really no profit to be made. I mean, I can just imagine what it must have been like for the first person to report a crop circle and being laughed at by everybody else. I mean, it's more pain and misery than some kind of vindication and reward.
I'm sure. Are there any kind of radiation readings from a crop circle?
That I'm not sure. Crop circles is not my field of expertise, but from what I can tell, based on the scientific research that's been done, I don't think it's been that damaging to people walking in close proximity or within a crop circle pattern. Whoever is creating the circles, I guess, obviously know that anything emanating from them could potentially cause us harm or something, but I haven't read any report of such things happening. So far we're relatively safe, I believe.
And is there any sort of significance between, let's say, crop circles, England's Stonehenge? Do you feel that that's left by the same people?
Stonehenge, I think, it's a tricky question, because I also happen to be an ancient astronaut theorist, and I think that Stonehenge was created a long, long time ago, and maybe a circular pattern has been a staple in every, or maybe circles is part of basic geometry. It would make sense, I guess, to start off with a circle or a square, but there could be a link. Maybe the circles, the crop circles, actually predate Stonehenge, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. But it's just funny that there's an awful lot of these circular mounds in England, and then all of a sudden you see initially most crop circle patterns were all circular in shape.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I just want to tell our viewers that are joining us, you're with the Ask Your Angels talk show, and tonight we have Michel Deschamps. We're talking about crop circles and UFOs, and the fact that we aren't alone. So, Michel, what are some of your favorite crop circles to date? And I believe we have some photos tonight.
Yeah, I sent you 3 photos. Photos 1, 2, and 3. The first photo is of an alien holding a CD, or it looks like a CD. It's more like one of those discs you find in a musical box. And apparently somebody has deciphered the message. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure your listeners, if they were to do research, or maybe I'll find the information and I'll post it on my website, they'll be able to read for themselves what scientists and researchers have found out. The second pattern that I sent you was a picture of what looks like a woven basket. And that's very intriguing, because in a lot of the crop circle patterns, this is one of the effects that it would be impossible for a man to create, because it's like you're weaving a layer of the crop above above and below another layer going the opposite way or another direction. And that would be an awful lot of work to do that. And then where the circles are, that's raised crop that hasn't been laid down. It's a very peculiar formation. I'm not sure what it signifies, but the fact that it looks like a woven basket is pretty intriguing, because that's very intricate in detail. The third photo I sent you was a response to, oddly enough, a message that was sent out on a probe. I think it was either Voyager 1 or Voyager 2, and it was Carl Sagan's idea, actually. And it showed sort of like a stick figure of a human, and a cross-section of our own solar system with the Earth being raised, so it would indicate that we're the third planet from our sun. And in this particular crop circle pattern, which happens to have appeared right next to a radio telescope, actually the answer came back. And if you look in the pattern, I have I'll create a link to a page that I found that has the detailed research that's been done on that. And the information that was brought back is very precise. You see a stick figure, sort of, but the head is extremely larger compared to ours. And the system seems to have 4 moons, because there's 4 dots that are raised. And their planet, I'm not sure exactly if it's the third or the fourth from their sun. And it showed the DNA strand, their DNA strand in comparison to ours. And it's very shocking to actually see a reply to a message we sent out in space back in the 70s.
That sounds familiar. I seem to recall hearing about that years ago. I just want to make sure, Michelle, that we do have that photo up for our viewers. We're good? Okay. Great. So, what is your favorite story behind the discovery of a crop circle?
I think it's there was a snowflake pattern that was discovered. And as we were talking earlier, like what's creating the crop circles, there's actually a little moving image that I have on my crop circle page. And it's actually the snowflake formation being created as the 2 sets of 2 white lights swoop over the property. I'd seen this on a sightings episode way back in the late 90s, but to actually have found this moving picture online, I said, well, I got to place this on my website, because it shows that the crop circle is laid down in seconds. And the 2 little lights, there's 2 lights that come in a large curve motion, and as they leave the picture, there's 2 other lights that come from a different direction, and the rest of the pattern is laid down, like the branches of the snowflake. And so that is one of the, and I believe it's actually in my sampling of crop circle pictures at my crop circle webpage. I took a sampling because I had already cataloged like 2,000 crop circle pictures by location, date, year, and area or whatever. But a sampling of 200 I thought was enough, and it's in there. It's amongst those ones. I forget the year that it was made, but that's one of the patterns that impressed me, because you'd actually see the lights swooping over the property, and then all of a sudden, within seconds, boom, it's there.
Wow. Maybe, Michelle, you could let people know what your website is, so that if they want to have a look at it.
Oh, sure. It's www, and I'll spell it out. It's N as in Normand, O, U, F as in Frank, O, R as in Research, and S as in Steve. It's www.newforce.com. You just punch up New Force on Google, and it should pop up with my name next to it or whatever. It's fairly easy to find it now compared to what it was when I first started working on it, because as I created more pages, it seems to branch out even more and make it easier for people to locate it. But it's New Forest stands for Northern Ontario UFO Research and Study, but obviously I cover a lot more than just Northern Ontario on the website. It's expanded that much.
Right. No, your website's so impressive. I encourage everyone to have a look at Michelle's website after the show. um, so, has any eyewitnesses ever claimed to have seen a crop circle being formed?
Well, actually, the person who saw, obviously the one who had set up a camera over the field where the snowflake appeared, I don't know exactly what the reaction of that person was, but there is a researcher by the name of Peter Sorensen who actually looked at it, and to my amazement, he didn't believe what he was looking at. And I said, well, if you've been looking for the evidence of what's creating these things, you have a piece of footage there, and it's gone through all kinds of testing to see if somebody was not using a morphing program online or whatever. And it's an accurate, it's got to be real footage. I mean, the pattern was in the field the next day. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's been witnesses that have seen pattern being formed. I know of one story of a pilot who flew from point A to point B over a period of half an hour, and the fields over which he had flown, there was nothing there. Half an hour later, he flies back, and there's a large pattern that just appeared in the time that he had gone there and back. So, and not enough time there to have an entire army of people working on it because they would have been caught in the act.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So I'm sure there's been a lot more. Probably we won't even hear about till a few months or a few years from now. And sometimes it takes a while for people to come out of the woodwork and actually say or admit that they've seen something unusual.
It must be hard when there's so many skeptics out there to come forward.
Well, it was like that for me when I had my sightings. One particular sighting, it took me 3 days to gather the nerves to call somebody, and I wasn't with any UFO group at the time. I only thought of calling the police station, and they kept me online long enough to determine whether or not I was nuts. So,
what was the verdict?
well, they basically said they hadn't gotten any other reports, and it only had been my second sighting, but it was no more impressive one. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. But I decided I needed to join a group after that because the skepticism was really bad back then. It's not as bad now, but I went through a terrible time back in the early 90s when I first came out of the ufological closet, so to speak.
I'm sure. Do you think crop circles might be formed by vortices?
Not at all. Not at all. It'd be like saying maybe volcanoes or a wind devil or dust devil actually are creating these, and the patterns are too. Some of the patterns, they have rectangles and triangles. Vortices would not create something that goes right down to a point. It doesn't make any sense to me. Mm-hmm. And after seeing the footage of the little balls of light maneuvering in and out, which have been surveyed under surveillance by the British military, I mean, obviously it's not vortices because they wouldn't have bothered to, set up surveillance on these things. So no, vortices have nothing to do with crop circles whatsoever. This is an intelligence of some kind that's using very, very specific mathematics and sacred geometry to create these things for whatever reason. As of yet, we may not know exactly, but no.
Okay, and the fact that they found cellular changes in plants around the crop circles, do most people feel that crop circles are, in fact, the work of aliens?
Maybe they do say aliens. I think a lot of them, they're not sure. People have started talking about interdimensional beings, never mind physical beings. Obviously, these little balls of light are nothing anywhere near humanoid form, and who knows what they are. So aliens, it's definitely alien to us. But I'm not sure if nobody's ever seen little gray men milling around in the fields to do these things, so who knows? But definitely alien, intelligence of some type is behind this.
Mm-hmm. So, well, let's move on to a galaxy far, far away, and I'm going to ask you, what are UFOs?
UFOs are unidentified flying objects. They're unidentified. They are flying a lot of times, sometimes hovering, and they are objects because they've been recorded on radar. I know that the term UFO has become so generic that I've had people even tell me, say, oh, you claim to have seen a UFO, but I bet you if you did more in-depth research, you'd find out that what you saw was a weather balloon or an airplane or an odd, man-made object. I'd rather go with the original term, the original
Flying
definition,
saucer?
which was coined by Edward J. Ruppelt, who was in charge of Project Blue Book. He basically coined the term UFO because flying saucers was being used before, first off. But then they were getting reports of cigar-shaped objects, triangular-shaped objects, rectangular-shaped objects, cigar shapes, circular objects. So flying saucers didn't quite work out because they were getting reports of objects that were outside of just being circular in shape. So the U.S. Air Force came up with UFO. But like I said, it's become a problem now. Maybe they should call them unidentified alien vehicles or aerial vehicles, and some people do use those terms because UFO is so easy now to just say, well, okay, you claim you saw a UFO, but I bet you probably saw an IFO, an identified flying object, which would be either man-made, celestial phenomena, atmospheric phenomena, or a satellite, And so I reverted to the original definition, and I even placed, in quotes, the original definition on my website, and that's what I go on when I talk about UFOs and flying saucers. I certainly make damn sure that even when I'm reporting something that I thoroughly investigate what I've seen before coming right out and claiming that I saw something, because if it's found out that it was something man-made of any unusual shape, I don't want to be the laughing stock. And I know that I wouldn't laugh at anybody reporting something unusual to me because it wouldn't be fair, because I've seen a lot of things that are unusual myself. So.
Right. Okay, so what would you say UFOs, we've covered what they look like. Did we get a photo up? We have a photo.
Yeah, I sent you a photo of...
Number 4.
The whole different shapes and models, just like we have different shapes and models of vehicles here on the planet. There's quite a few there. It pretty well covers all that's been seen, but the weirdest UFOs I've seen are just a simple source of light, but it's the behavior that sort of gets your attention, like whether they still move away from your eyes and are still being lit. When a plane moves away, most of the major lights on the plane are facing the other way, where the plane is headed to. When you see a plane move away from you, you don't see a light flashing back towards your eyes. You'll see the wingtip lights. But with a light source that's a UFO, it'll look like a star, but it's obviously moving away from you, and it's gaining distance between you and it. Or sometimes it could go from side to side, up and down. But these particular shapes, I guess, throughout the years, they've been seen by witnesses, sometimes in groups of 4 or more. And those sightings tend to attract more attention because there's more than just one witness that claims to have seen them together. A lot of the sightings I've had, unfortunately, I was by myself, and it's really hard to get witnesses sometimes, because it's nice when you have other people there to say that they saw the same thing as you, because then you feel better about it than just looking like a crazy person who's reporting something by yourself.
I know. I was out camping one night with Tech Guy years ago, and I was left alone at the fireplace, and I was looking up at the sky, and I saw a white light it had to be a million miles away. It was like a pinprick, but I was fixated on it. And now I don't know if you've ever heard of one doing this, because I noticed on your website it shows it kind of moves away, as you said.
Yeah.
But this one darted all over the sky. because I looked and thought, well, it can't be an airplane, it can't be a satellite. It's literally darting all over the place.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of something like that?
Did you see could you see the constant trail of it as it was moving from one area to the other?
No, actually, I couldn't.
Okay, well, those are called jumpers, actually. I've seen those myself. It's like you're looking at a single flash of light, just a single flash of light. It's a satellite. You can tell a satellite, space station, whatever. You can see it go across because you're following it. It's on steady.
Right.
These things only flash once, and as you're looking in that direction, from your corner of your eye, you'll see it another single flash. Then you look there. And then again, from your other corner of your eye, you'll see another single flash. So it's almost as if you were to connect the dots. It would either describe a square or a triangle in the sky. Not necessarily that's what they're trying to do. But these things are only flashing once, disappearing, reappearing somewhere else, flashing once, disappearing again, and somewhere else a third or fourth time sometimes, and after that they're gone. It's the weirdest thing.
That's what it was. It was very strange. And of course, Tech Guy just attributed it to me drinking by the fire, but I swear I saw it.
Yeah.
I just want to say, for those of you who have just joined us, you are with Christine and the Ask Your Angels talk show. We're on every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And tonight's special guest is Michelle Deschamps, and we're talking about crop circles and UFOs. So going back to UFOs, what's the difference between close encounters of the first kind and close encounters of the second kind?
Okay, close encounters of the first kind is actually there's two different categories. There's relatively distant sightings and relatively close sightings. The relatively distant sightings, you've got three different categories. You've got nocturnal lights, daylight discs, and radar visual cases. In relatively close sightings are usually within 200 yards. Close encounters of the first kind is when a witness observes a UFO nearby, but there appears to be no interaction with either the witness or the environment. Close encounters of the second kind include details of interaction between the UFO and the environment, which may vary from interference with car ignition systems and electronic gear to imprints or burns on the ground and physical effects on plants, animals, and humans. There's also close encounters of the third kind. That's when there's the observation of occupants, but no interaction. And I've added, there's three more. Actually, I just heard of a seventh one, but close encounters of the fourth kind, that's the person being unwillingly taken and experimented on inside the alien craft. That's the abduction cases. Close encounters of the fifth kind is when direct communication between aliens and humans, usually if it's the humans, let's say, flashing their headlights at a UFO, and the UFO actually flashes back. That's close encounters of the fifth kind. Now, in close encounters of the sixth kind, thank God, doesn't occur too often, but it's when contact between aliens and humans result in permanent injury and in rare cases, even death. And that's happened.
That has.
Yeah, especially in Brazil. In Brazil, the people have melted like candles. The UFOs are using a red beam to immobilize the person, or no, the green beam to immobilize the person, and the red beam burns like a laser. There's one case where a wife actually witnessed her husband as he died right in front of her. And so in Brazil or South America, even the smokers won't go outside to light up a cigarette because in the eventuality that a UFO spots them and swoops down to try and grab them. It's really strange. But these cases, this classification was put together by J.L. Hynek, who was the consultant to Project Blue Book in the States, who initially was a skeptic until he investigated some of the more famous landing cases in the States. And the odd thing that I found out is of all the places he could have picked to vacation, it was Blind River. And his camp is still there, but it's used as a research facility. I was there a couple of years ago. Well, just 2 camps down, because I have friends that own a camp there, and I was surprised. And basically, Lake DeBorn, which is just 15 minutes north of Blind River, is considered a UFO hotspot of Ontario, let's say.
Okay.
And so his classification, thanks to him that we have this classification of different close encounters, so we can put a sighting in a particular category depending on what has been witnessed.
And you sent us photos to show us of that, right?
Yeah, the physical trace cases, that would be close encounters. The second kind was when it leaves evidence behind, whether it's a scorched area, in some cases radiation in radioactive isotopes in the tree rings, let's say, if it's in the woods. The first photo I sent you of physical trace cases occurred in 1971 in Delphos, Kansas. It's a famous case where the soil was dehydrated 14 inches down. And it was witnessed by a little boy who actually saw the UFO depart the area. So we had the sighting of the UFO and also witnessing the effect left behind by the UFO. And his parents went out, and his mom, who was working in a nursing home or something, her job was to check the pulse of her patients. Well, she couldn't do that for a long time because when she touched the area where the soil was devoid of plants, her fingers went numb. And when she touched her jeans, that particular part of her leg went numb, and it stayed like that. I thought it stayed like that for just a few years, but apparently it stayed like that till the day she died. Now, that's a really unusual effect. The second picture I sent you, actually, the 2 circles, that was the case that I investigated on Manitoulin Island. Again, very, very close similarity, except that this was on hard limestone with a covering of about 3/4 of an inch of gravel. And the gravel was blown away, leaving these 2 donut-shaped indentations, as I call them, indicating that there was 2 objects there. One probably came to the assistance of another, because I've heard that in several cases before. The third picture I sent you, the similar landing took place in Algonquin Park in 1997, but only 5 feet from the shoreline. And as you can tell in that picture, it's like the ice melted and refroze again, like in the immediate area surrounding the circle, the landing pattern. The fourth picture I sent you was, again, very similar to the Manitoulin one, but it took place 11 years later in a place called Denver, North Carolina. And the fifth and last picture I sent you, or actually not the last one, but it's the fifth one, that took place, again, on grass, and it took place in New Mexico just back in 2008. And the sixth photo that I sent you is a case in upstate New York, or Indiana, I'm not sure, but I'll have to look it up. But it just shows that the physical landing trace actually was there during the snow. And the area where the landing took place, the snow doesn't stay, and the area does not absorb moisture. It's another weird effect of this, the dehydrated soil or the UFO-affected soil. It's a difference between the actual landing pattern and any other normal soil around the area. It's really weird. It's funny when people like Carl Sagan would say there's no physical evidence. Show me the evidence. If there's no evidence, therefore there's no UFOs. Well, the evidence is right there. It's been there all along. And it's about time. Like Ted Phillips is the leading authority on physical trace cases. He's down in Missouri. And he's personally interviewed or investigated 500 cases, but he's collected 4,000 cases from 93 countries. Wow. That's a lot of physical evidence for someone to say, well, there's nothing to UFOs. So this is where I'm trying to emphasize. That's why I decided to create the website, too, is to place all this physical evidence stuff on one single website where people can just have access to all of it, or as much as I can provide.
No, and you're providing a great service by doing that, because people need to wake up and know that this is real.
They do. We've been in a slumber for way too long, and I can understand. I've been in their position before where this is an awful lot to swallow, and maybe showing this much all of a sudden on the website is a lot to make people swallow or look at. eventually the wall of ridicule is going to break down, and even self-skepticism or not believing what your eyes are seeing, that eventually erodes away. And then, but I found it for myself that once you've got the floodgates are open, you can't close them back. There's been times when this has been so overwhelming for me, I just wanted to have my normal life, but you can't. Once it's you're there, and you're stuck with it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
might as well do something constructive with it.
Exactly. And the thing is, we've all heard about crop circles and UFOs over the years. So eventually, you know, it gets to the point where you have to take it seriously. This isn't just some, like you said, it's not just some hoax.
Yeah, it's not a sighting made by the town drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning. A lot of the sightings are taking place in broad daylight. And we're talking ex-politicians. I'm about to create a page that will have celebrities and UFOs, rock musicians and UFOs, ex-military and UFOs, ex-politicians and UFOs, scientists and UFOs. They say astronomers have never seen UFOs. I have an entire list of astronomers that have seen UFOs, starting with Edmund Halley, discoverer of Halley's Comet, Clyde Tombaugh, who discovered Pluto. He had sightings through his telescope. So there's plenty of evidence if you're willing to take the time to look for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I've made it easy by placing it on my website because I've done the research, some of it. I don't claim to know everything. If I knew everything, like I said before, I would have no reason. I'd have to stop research. I'd have to go on to something else. Maybe I'll study Bigfoot. But
well, you know what?
At a time.
I would love to do a show on Bigfoot, so when you're ready, you let me know.
Okay.
So, Michelle, would you say UFOs are a natural phenomenon?
No. There may be some new atmospheric phenomena or conditions that have been recently, well, I wouldn't say recently, but things like sprites. Funny, they're all named after characters from Lord of the Rings, let's say. There's gnomes, sprites. These are all like different colored jets. It's almost like having a release valve, and these are taking place high in the atmosphere above thunderclouds. And they've only been reported from the space shuttle the last few years, I guess. And I didn't know about that atmospheric condition. Now we have another one where there's these weird, very weird cloud formations that looks like a punch hole right through the clouds. And they look like a large saucer from Independence Day movie, let's say, but they're not. So people have to be very careful. I think pretty well that all atmospheric conditions, the weird phenomena that happens with weather, have been detected before and have been cataloged. And so we know when it occurs that that's what it is and it's not a UFO. So I'm hoping that we've pretty well have witnessed everything that has to do with the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to say that one of the major former researcher was actually an expert on atmospheric conditions from the University of Arizona, and he was one of the people who actually created one of the 5 top studies on UFOs, serious studies that a lot of the public don't even know exists, and his name was James C. McDonald, and so he knew about atmospheric conditions, and he tried to investigate to see that if that's what was the cause of all the cars stalling, and in particular encounters where a UFO would land on the highway and all the cars would stop, and then as soon as the object would leave, the cars would start up again. But that kind of effect. Well, I don't think it's natural at all. I think there's something behind it. And it's probably something that's been here a very, very long time.
Well, I have to tell you, because, you know, normally we have the guest in the studio, and you actually didn't see this, but when you were talking about the town drunk creating the UFO or crop circle, you know, you said he was out there drunk creating this thing. Tech guy had his hand up going, "That's me." So that's why I was laughing. But you've had many UFO sightings yourself,
yeah.
And you have sent us some photos. So we have photos 11 to 15.
Yeah.
maybe we could go through those now.
Yeah, the first photo I sent you was a sphere that I saw. It was actually the first sighting I had when I was 9 years old, but it was either something I thought I'd seen on TV and somehow kept it in my memory or whatever. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure. I doubted myself about that sighting for many years, because the next one over, the red object next to the abandoned radar base, which is no longer there today, I even provided a picture of what the radar base looked like back then. Well, there was a good span of many years between those two sightings. I had the first sighting, like I said, when I was 9, and the one at the radar base was when I was 20-something. So obviously I knew then, and we don't live too far. At the time I didn't live too far from the airport, so I knew what planes looked like at night and whatever. But that first sighting, it was just a metallic sphere. It looked like, at first I looked to see it wasn't tied down. I thought it was an advertising balloon, because there is a sock flag like you find at the airport. That's what is on the pole there. But it was just a property with gravel and rackety old aluminum shed and a couple of U-Haul trailers just parked there. And this ball was at treetop level, not tied down or anything. And I thought it was advertisement balloon of some kind. Mm-hmm. Maybe possibly having to do with the U-Haul trailers, but it wasn't. And the reflection off the sun is what's glinting on the upper right portion of that sphere. And it was no more than maybe, well, I don't know how small I was back then at 9 years old, but this thing was probably no larger than a meter wide, I guess, in diameter. Well, years later, when I moved to Niagara Falls for a couple of years, I found a Canadian book that talked about, one chapter was Sudbury, Ontario, and Eastern Townships. And it was between the exact same date that I found myself at the end of my street when I saw this, which was July 1974. And it turns out that not only was these whitish blue spheres being seen by people in Sudbury and Hanmer, but unbeknownst to me, there was a near miss with a CPR flight that I just left Montreal, leaving for Winnipeg, with a 100-foot diameter disc, and it did an evasive maneuver twice to avoid the UFO, because the UFO wouldn't move. It was pacing with the plane, but it was in front of it, and I believe the pilot had all the passengers look out to the north, and they could all see the object. And so that freaked me out. So then I realized,
that would freak out the
really
passengers.
saw this. And years later, in 93, 94, when I bought 5 microfilm reels from the National Archives with all these documents, like hundreds of thousands of documents, I found 2 or 4 pages that actually pertain to this sighting. So I have more confirmation there that I wasn't imagining things, and it was a real sighting that I had when I was 9. Now, the sighting at the radar base was exciting because when I first saw it, it looked like Jupiter at its brightest, but it was moving down out of the sky. And it was moving down at an angle because as it was coming lower and lower, it was getting brighter and brighter. So I'm assuming it was coming towards my eyes, 6 miles away, but at 45-degree angle. And then it proceeded to follow the chain of hills that we have here, and it eventually led up to the radar base. But I went to 3 different locations to look for it, and I couldn't see it. And when I crested a hill that we have not about maybe exactly 4 miles away from the radar base, that's when I saw it hovering next to the base. And the funny thing is, my assumption is it was there to investigate why the radar base was no longer functioning, because it had closed in 1986-87, and this was 1990 in October. So I'm assuming it came down, because it must have known it was being tracked by radar way back when, at some point, or whatever. Or, like I say, I don't think it's the same race coming back and back and back again. There's multiple races, but that was one of the sightings. Then the other one with the what looks like 2 sea urchins. I was sitting downstairs at home watching TV, and one of my friends called me up and said, listen, I just seen 2 objects over Sudbury. They're heading north towards Hanmer. Get out and see them. And so I got dressed, and I went to the same hilltop that was my favorite vantage point. Couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything. I had my camcorder with me. Then, had I not turned around to look towards the west, I would have not seen these things. There was no sound whatsoever, but they were moving the speed of jets. And the one on the right was actually moving north faster, leaving the other one behind, sort of thing. But it was still following each other. And my camcorder didn't capture anything because the light source was just too faint. And the strobing was just 10 times faster than the flashing on a plane. It was really weird, no sound, and maybe 500 feet above the ground. The other picture I sent you was a sighting I had with two adults, two other people, and my partner in Blind River, as a matter of fact. We're investigating an abduction case, and we seen this object. We could still make it out as a black egg-shaped object, even in the pitch blackness. But then it would catch on a light glow, then a super bright glow for about 5 seconds, and then go down to a dull glow, and then go black again for 7 seconds. And then it kept doing that 11 times. I fiddled with my camcorder, never got a shot, but it took so long to cross the sky. I would have been able to get something, no problem. If I would have had my charger with me, I ran out of power, and it's like, oh crap. But it's fascinating sightings. I've had way more than that, but these are the more convincing ones that I've had. And I haven't skywatched in about 6-7 years because I know they're there. I'm leaving it up to the skeptics to have their own sightings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
I know they're there. I don't need to be convinced. I second-guessed myself for the first 10 sightings that I've had, and after a while I just gave up. I said, you know what, they're there. I have to face the fact they're there. You know, and it's not just one race visiting us. It's multiple races. The U.S. Air Force say they've cataloged 57. On my website, I've got 85 or 86 different species that have come here, and totally separate from the ones that are performing the abductions. I've put those on a separate page. Okay. Just to people make a distinction between the two of them.
And have you captured any on video?
I've captured 2. I don't know if I've placed them on. I did place them on my website. If people are willing to email me, I can redirect them. I should have a companion booklet that goes with my website because it's so complex now. It interweaves onto itself and interlinks to the internet. I have so many hot pages, as I call them. It's really hard to just tell them where to go and look for the information. But I did see a daytime footage. I do have a daytime footage that I captured, and it was a cigar shape, almost like a burning piece of phosphorus, I was told. And when it went behind a long bank of cloud, it reappeared later as a sphere. This was really weird. But then I got so frustrated my camcorder wasn't set for manual, it was set for automatic, so it kept going in and out of focus. And so I just stopped the camera, but I kept looking at the object with my binoculars. The other footage I have was very short-lived again, and frustrating too. It was at night, but the camcorder back then, the analog camcorder, did not justify the color. It was orange in color with a slight halo. It looked like the comet Hale-Bopp, which actually was out that year, but this was orange in color, and at night I could distinctively see the roof of our house and the neighbor's tree, and this thing flew between the moon and Jupiter, or Venus, at that time. And so I knew it was something because the movement was noticeable. It wasn't like stationary. You know, they say stars move. Yeah, stars move over hours and hours when you stay there, but these things, the movement is noticeable right away, and no sound. So those are the only 2 footage, the 2 clips that I have. I wish I had clear shots. One guy at work, he complains that UFO photos are never clear. There are some really clear ones. The reason why I have older photos on my website is because they've all had negatives with them, and they've all been analyzed to death. You put a digital photo on there, it could have been done with anything. Computer, morphing program, whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, if I knew who the person was that took a picture, a digital photo of a UFO, and I can trust them, fine. But I have pictures on there that date back to the 30s and 20s, and it's not something that could be faked or reproduced. They've tried to reproduce them. Well, I suppose you can reproduce them just like you can reproduce a $20 bill. But just because you can duplicate a $20 bill doesn't mean that all $20 bills are counterfeit.
Right.
You know?
So, Michelle, maybe you could give people who have just joined us your website again and your email address.
Okay. The website address is www.newforce.com. I'll spell it out. It's N as in Normand, O, U, F as in Frank, O, R as in Research, and S as in Steve.com. And my email address, you can just go on the website and you'll see my name in blue. Anything that's in blue is a link. If you see my name there on the director's page, you just click that and you'll be able to email me.
And can you tell us, what does MUFON stand for? MUFON.
MUFON. It stands for the Mutual UFO Network. And originally when I joined in 91, after having written this, I sort of put together this book in high school called my Easy Access book. And I wanted to do something with the research, so I talked to a nuclear physicist out in New Brunswick, the grandfather of Roswell, as a matter of fact, Stanton Friedman, a good friend of mine. And he said, well, not because I'm on the panel, but you can join MUFON. So I contacted the Mutual UFO Network in 91 and became a member. And at the time they were based in Seguin, Texas, but now they've since moved to Colorado. And they have people from 45 different fields of sciences. They're actually looking into every aspect, whether it's an animal mutilation case to physical trace cases to landings, crashes. I think there's a team now that's put together in case there's reports of a downing of a UFO or more likely a crash of a UFO. Downing is kind of funny because in the 50s there was actually a law put in place by the U.S. Air Force to shoot them down at any cost so that they could have physical evidence. But then they've had to rescind that law because they were losing too many pilots and planes because the UFOs took a defensive stance at our approach. So a lot of people may not know that, but it actually happened. And I plan to get a book that actually was written about that called Shoot 'Em Down. It's available online somewhere. But anyways, this is what, MUFON is all about. A lot of research done. I don't know if they do like I used to do, actually go into schools and speak. I sometimes felt that I had the impression that they were just collecting the information and sitting on it and not doing a lot with it. You know, they do have a nice website, and I have a link to it on my links page. But because of costs and things, I might get back into it, joining them, but or rejoining them. But for now, I've decided to just focus on other things, and then when pretty well my website's complete, or as complete as it can be, I'll rejoin the group, just because I miss having the monthly journal that I used to get, because that's how I got some of what's the latest, happening elsewhere.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about your work with researcher Jan Aldrich, Project 1947, the book that she wrote?
That was because of my newspaper research. I collected all the clippings, and Jan was actually passing through Canada. His project 1947, actually consisted of people worldwide actually researching over 2,000 newspapers for clippings to see if there was any other rash of sightings or wave of sightings, or flaps, as they used to call them, that predated 1947. Turns out that there wasn't. Well, maybe in 1800s, 1897, there was all these sightings of airships, but basically that was his intent. And when he was passing through Toronto, my web host lived there at the time and was a researcher himself, and so he put the word out to him, to Jan, that I had all these clippings. And so I provided Jan with a whole set of clippings, and in exchange, he sent me a whole whack of documents from NICAP and APRO, which they were the two original UFO groups of the 50s and 60s down in the States, and some interesting Canadian documents too. But after a while, Jan produced this book, and he says, by the way, you're mentioned in there as being one of two Canadians to do a thorough search of newspapers, and that's how I wound up in his book, which totally surprised me. And it was a nice pat on the back for the work that I had done thus far.
Absolutely.
At that time.
That's incredible. That must have been an honor.
Yeah. To say the least.
So the first documented sighting of a UFO then was around 1947?
In the modern era, yes, but I've got sighting reports dating back to biblical times, actually. Alexander the Great actually saw flying shields. Ezekiel saw the wheel, or a wheel within a wheel. I believe there's other odd things in the Bible that, if they were to be put in the context of a UFO sighting, it would make more sense to say that's what they had, that's what they saw. Something unusual. Like Jonah and the whale, for instance. In the 60s, for instance, there were a lot of reports of these black silhouettes surfacing on the ocean, and they thought they were Russian subs. I'm thinking if Jonah had been swallowed by a whale, first of all, you look at any whales there are, the large ones or whatever, there's none of them that can swallow a man whole and have him inside the whale for 3 days, much less, and he, apparently in some of the writings, what he described as entrails or ribbing on the inside looked like metal. So I don't know the last time that a whale was made of metal, but to me it indicates to me that Jonah and the whale is another one of those stories where he was probably taken and then released on shore, just noticing this black silhouette of a shape in the distance that eventually went away. There's also the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. I mean, weird happenings that have been recorded throughout time. Christopher Columbus, as he came over, had a UFO encounter. There was also a boat captain by the name of Captain Banner who had a sighting in the 1500s, or the 1300s, I forget. So sightings go way back, probably predating mankind. I mean, we're finding, not always, but we're beginning to find evidence that something has been here before. There's footprints that have been seen, or boot prints, or shoe prints, or something that have been found. And in one of the shoe prints, there's a 65 million year old fossil of a trilobite. So, who was around wearing shoes 65 million years ago? So it makes you wonder. We think we know everything. Yeah, we know a lot about the moon. We know more about the moon than we do about the oceans. But it's the arrogance that we seem to have to say, oh, we've covered everything, we know everything. I'm finding out every day that the more I think I know, the more I actually realize that I know nothing. I discover something new every day, and not just pertaining to UFOs, just in normal day life. And it's a fascinating world, and it never stops to amaze me. Some of the discoveries we're making, or things that are surfacing, whether it's a new animal being discovered. I mean, we're discovering races or new animals like every day. There's insects and animals that still have been cataloged.
Really?
Bigfoot might be one of them. But it's just, there's enough there for people to research and for instance, I always go back and think, well, you got these kids that have nothing to live for and they commit suicide. Well, you know what? If they could focus their energies on something constructive like this, we'd probably have this mystery solved in no time.
No,
we have an army of people looking into this stuff and expanding their minds and making themselves feel worthy of accomplishing something that nobody else seems to want to do or bother with. The people that are busy making money, the corporations, or even the people involved in keeping the secrecy.
I think as people awaken, more and more people will be looking and researching and questioning, for sure.
And with all this talk of 2012, I think that's what it is. It's not the end of the world. I think 2012 is going to be the beginning of a new mindset.
I do too.
It's going to change because it's more people are aware. Our young kids are growing up in a world where all this stuff has been discovered, and there's still discoveries being made. They're not as closed minds as their parents and grandparents might have been. So it's an awakening, and it's going to start.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, you've mentioned that there's been a lot of UFO sightings recorded by astronauts. Obviously, some sort of alien life has visited us here on Earth. What is the difference between a humanoid and an alien? Or
I'd say
better,
there's no difference. It's actually a joke. I think it's a universal joke. I don't know if God has a sense of humor, if God's even behind the creation of these beings or whatever. I mean, who's to say? I mean, I've never seen God, never seen a photograph of him, but I have a lot of evidence for UFOs. I think that from all the reports, it seems that an awful lot, 98, 99% of all reported sightings of occupants have all been humanoid in shape. There's been a few reports where there's been some very exotic forms, but for the most part, they've all been humanoid in shape. And from certain scientific papers that I've read about evolution, on how you could go from a creepy crawly kind of creature to something that stands upright where all its sensory organs are at the very top, I think it's the best model for survival, because when you're a creepy crawling creature, you can be behind a rock and it's very easy for a predator to pounce on you. But when you're standing upright and all your sensory organs are at the highest level, where you can see far away, your eyes are there, your ears are there, you can hear, taste, smell. You've got arms to climb trees, legs to run. You're better equipped to escape the predator if you're humanoid in shape, and of course to manipulate objects and drive vehicles and whatever. So it's no surprise to me that a lot of the reports include humanoids. There's very, 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 very few cases where some kind of creature that's not exactly on two legs and two arms have been reported. I don't even know if they have pets, but the only thing that's been reported are humanoid.
and you've sent us some photos of what some of the aliens look like, or people have claimed to have seen.
Yeah, those are just, they're not all of them. Like I said, most of the reports, the creatures have been seen once. They've been caught by surprise. They pack up in their ship and they leave. These ones here, I would say, the first four, that includes the Nordic type, which are human-looking in appearance. They could pass in a crowd if they dressed up the same way as we do, but they would have something different about them. They would have vertical slits for the irises, or no fingerprints. They'd have strange mannerisms on how they behave compared to us, but they're basically having to do with abductions. The reptilian types, that's the first type, the very first one on that picture. They're the ones that are reported mostly. It's almost as if they've divided the planet into sections, not to interfere with each other. The reptilians are reported more often in South America for some reason. The praying mantis type, which is the second one there, they have their eyes actually can take up a larger portion of their heads, and sometimes they're in charge of the operation. Sometimes they're the ones who are performing the abductions, and they're supervised by somebody else. Sometimes it's the human-looking ones, the Nordics, as they call them, because they're more muscular than we are. They're taller, and they look like they come from Finland or Norway. That's what they call them, Nordics. The guy dressed in black, that's the real Men in Black, and unlike the movies, the Men in Black are actually androids. Well, for the most part, whoever created them, they're there to silence people. They seem to be psychic enough to actually know that if you've seen a sighting, they'll soon after come and visit you, and they'll find a way to silence you by saying, "Oh, we know what you saw. You didn't see it." And for a long time, people thought they were FBI or the U.S. Air Force, but even the U.S. Air Force and the FBI have been looking for these guys because they were passing themselves off as themselves. Totally unrelated. They have a very, very weird olive complexion. Their eyes are slanted. Sometimes they try to disguise themselves with these dark glasses. And they have mint-condition cars that seem to disappear around the corner, as one researcher found out in the 50s when he followed them. And he just rounded the corner, and the car was no longer there, and there was no way for the car to disappear anywhere off the road. The other alien after that is a small neonate, they call them. I guess it's akin to the type that was seen in the movie Close Encounters. And the last one is the Roswell alien. That's what they look like. They look like little, like children. But their eye sockets are larger than ours, and they measure between 3 to 3.5 feet in height. But the grays, there's different variations too. Some of them measure 3.5 feet. Some of them measure 5 to 6 feet. I know in near a mine site here in 1954, a guy walking to work every day because he lived nearby the mine shaft actually encountered 3 13-foot tall beings next to a landed craft. And that story made the front page of the paper, but it was soon covered up. And the area was made to look like nothing had happened. And this is 1954. So, but like I said, my website has, I've cataloged like 86 of them from different places around the Earth, and they look different. Some of them really have a lot of similarities, but it's fascinating stuff to look at them and wonder what they're like. Anybody coming to me and claiming that they know what they eat, they know what they're called, they know what their planet's called, that's BS. I know that person is lying, because nobody has those answers. If we had those answers, it'd be a lot easier to aim the telescope in a particular direction. Now, because of a famous abduction case of 1961, we know at least of one origin where one particular race comes from, and it's a binary star system in the southern hemisphere, which you can't see it from here, but we can talk about that in a little bit.
Is that the one they made the movie?
Yeah. UFO Incident, 1975, and James Earl Jones, famous for the voice of Darth Vader, played the Black Husband, Barney Hill, and his wife was played by Estelle Parsons, who played Roseanne's mom on Roseanne, on TV, the TV show Roseanne. And it's a real case, very accurate to what actually happened. They were taken on board a landed UFO in 1961 after they were coming back from their honeymoon in Montreal, and they lived in New Hampshire. And the story came out eventually through hypnotic sessions with a psychiatrist, and a few years after that, a book was written about their story. And it was then that it was found out that she had been shown a star map, and she didn't know anything about astronomy, and you couldn't very well explain it to her where they were coming from, but she remembered the map under hypnosis later on. And some school teacher tried to debunk everything, and she made 25 three-dimensional models of our neighborhood, galactic neighborhood. And the funny thing is, the pattern is within a series of around 54 light years in all direction from our sun. There's 1,000 stars. And out of that 1,000 stars, there's 46 sun-like stars with possibility of planets and life around them. See, we're not talking about the next galaxy over. This is within the neighborhood, but we're out in the boonies. And this particular system is a binary system where they have reason to visit each other because they can see their neighbors. We can't see our neighbor's chimney, for instance, but they could. And so it would give them an incentive to start doing something about becoming space explorers. So it's a fascinating story. The movie's really well done, but that's how we found out where a particular race comes from. I think the Barnard Star was another location that was mentioned before, and the Orion's Belt. And for some reason, some of the sightings I've had, looking straight up at the Big Dipper, the UFOs seem to be streaming in from the Big Dipper. So whether it's a passageway or an international route for them, I'm not sure. But looking towards the Big Dipper, maybe you'll have a sighting if you keep looking in that direction. I'm not sure.
I think that's where I saw the light that was darting all over the place, because I was actually looking at the Big Dipper.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. So would you say that these aliens are obviously a higher, what's the word? They're more advanced than we are?
Yeah, if the next star over is at least 4 billion years older than our own sun, that gives them quite a head start in developing and having everything from, whatever it is that they, I doubt that they built bikes and, did the same things we did. But, and who knows if we can consider them masters of, space travel, because they obviously get here and they crash. Doesn't mean they're perfect or supreme beings, but they're definitely more advanced because, unlike us, I believe they don't use any money, and they're able to build these large ships and manipulate objects and do things with light that can't be done. A lot of the abduction cases, people are lifted in a beam of light. I don't know of any technique like that on Earth that you actually can use a beam of light to lift an animal, much less a person. But they can. Some UFOs, some aliens are flying UFOnauts. They're able to levitate themselves or fly around a hovering UFO and repair them and then take off. They're definitely more advanced, and who knows how far advanced they are. I keep saying like hundreds of thousands of years, but they could be millions of years in advance. And in one particular case, it was told by an insider in the Air Force or whoever that their lifespan is between 340 to 400 Earth years.
Wow.
So, yeah. So whether it's the reptilian type or the typical gray, I'm not sure, but that's a long time for for a creature to live and be able to, propagate and.
Wow, if we lived that long, we'd really look like aliens.
Yeah, maybe after going through a few nuclear wars and surviving those, and who's to say? It's been told to me that maybe these are creatures from our own future, but I says I'd be hard pressed to even fit in a body like that or in a costume like that, because they got scrawny little necks. They're 3.5 feet tall. I'm 5'4", 5'6", 5'4", and no hair, and it's like, I'm going bald, but there's no way I'd ever look like that. I don't think so. I don't know. I could be surprised, and they are from the future or another dimension, but I'd rather deal with the physicality first and then cover the interdimensional aspects later on.
Yeah.
Once it's been discovered it's technology that's allowing them to disappear and appear at will or be in a different light spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
I've been told that you use infrared cameras, and infrared cameras aimed in the same area of the sky as a regular camera. The regular camera won't show anything except clouds and a tree, and the infrared camera will show the tree, the same cloud, and a hovering UFO. So it's like, I'd love to get my hands on an infrared camera, because I'd like to know if there's any hovering objects that, day in, day out that are there that we can't see with the naked eye.
But then they'd see them, and they'll carry you off into their spaceship. So
yeah, which has never happened to me. I've been asked that. You had so many sightings. You must have been abducted. You must have been abducted. No, never saw the occupants. Never been abducted. But I know somebody in town who has seen the occupants twice. Him and his wife once, and him and his best friend another time in the late 60s, looking through a powerful telescope as a hovering UFO was nearby, and the telescope brought his view right in through the porthole, and could see 5 beings. One was dressed in black, obviously the leader, I guess, and the other 4 was dressed in silver suits. And he saw that. And he was a mine worker. He was one of the expert welders we had. He's still alive, but he's one of the very few that will go down in history as having a lot of licensing for welding together different alloys and metals and stuff, and I trust him. I sat down with him. His stories are all on my audio clips page on my website. You go under audio clips, it's the first picture you'll see there. His name is Don Campbell. Super nice man.
I'm just curious, Michelle. Sorry, the silver suits you mentioned?
Yeah.
Are they actual suits, or do they look like lab I have a reason for asking.
I'm not sure. I've never read any reports of them wearing lab coats. It's possible, but so far, whether they wear silver suits, a lot of times little gray guys seem to not wear anything at all.
Oh boy. Okay.
But they have no sexual organs. Nothing visible there. It's really odd. In some cases, I hear that they absorb nutrients through the pores of their skin. They don't eat with their mouth. They're mostly telepathic. That includes the Men in Black, the real Men in Black. But I mean, it's very, very odd. It's totally, in that sense, very alien development compared to us. But then again, we've got people here that claim to be psychic, and and they've been able to move objects and stuff. So we may have traits that they have, but silver suits, silver, garments like medical doctors. Although most of the abductions, that's what they are. It's got nothing to do with sex. It's if there's a case where they're having sex with a female creature of some type, it's the way by which these people are collecting sperm samples for whatever hybridization they're doing, collecting samples from men and female, women and men. It's got nothing to do with sex. It's all clinical. It's genetic. It's material that they need to survive, because I suppose they're a dying race. So maybe some of them or all of them are a dying race. And I read somewhere an abductee said that they're using genetic material from compatible bipeds, and they're able to mix and match genes better than we can, being that as advanced as they are.
Well, I was
so
going
I'm
to
sure
say,
there's medical techniques and things they can do to heal, to get rid of disease that we haven't figured out yet.
I was going to say, if they don't have any sexual organs, it's no wonder they're a dying race.
And maybe that's why they're using Earth females as to create these hybrid babies that cannot live here. They're implanted in the women, and at 3 months gestation period, the fetus, the tiny fetus, are removed and brought up to the ship and grown in artificial incubators or wombs, as it's been reported by some abductees. And because these creatures are half us and half them, they cannot live here. They can't breathe our air or something like that. So there's no question that they're doing something to keep themselves going, but it's not like they're accumulating an invasion force, for instance, because I think I mentioned you before, if that was the whole point of them doing that, whether they have the capability of time travel or not, we would have seen a sign by now that they wanted to take us over and, reclimate the planet and make it better suited for themselves. I don't think that's the point at all. They're just using us, and maybe sometimes people wish that they asked permission to get this genetic material, but I don't know what we'd do if we were in the same situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, looking at the Roswell incident,
yeah.
Now, they had a report of a spaceship crashing in Roswell, and there was this huge cover-up. There was a lot of controversy over it. I remember seeing a special on it years ago, and I actually believed that it was true.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
Yeah, the Roswell is only made famous because of the civilian witnesses that saw all of it or parts of it. And that includes military people. There's been military people that have actually reported seeing the bodies at a hangar, being put inside wooden crates. People saw the metal. Actually, Jesse Marcel Sr., who was the intelligence officer who was first on site, after the initial rancher had found the debris field, he brought pieces at home. On his way to the base, he stopped at home, woke up his 11-year-old son at the time, who was alive today, helicopter pilot, air crash accident investigator, and all that. And he remembers holding the piece of metal. It's really, really weird. It had like a little tiny I-beam with embossed symbols on the inside. I actually bought a replicate of that same thing that he had commissioned somebody to make, I guess. And just to have something to say, hey, this is like a facsimile of what actually was seen. But Roswell was only made famous because there's all these witnesses. There was an earlier crash in 1941 in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Actually, probably before that, there was another air crash of a strange object in 1897 in Aurora, Texas. Sightings going back, or even crashes going back to the 1500s. There's actually a wood carving of objects over Nuremberg, Germany, where there's like almost like a battle in the air, and some objects are seen smoking on the ground. So UFO crashes have occurred, maybe not as prevalent as sightings, but Roswell is only famous because it has so many witnesses. And soon after, it was important for whoever it is the job to cover this up, to put something in place where they'd be prepared the next time it would happen. Mm-hmm. And President Truman appointed a group of 12 people, 6 military, 2 from each branch, Air Force, Army, and Navy, and 6 civilians, it included scientists, to look at the UFO crashes and determine what it was and what was behind it. And the group was called Majestic 12. Now, I know a lot of people, again, in this particular case, they'd say it was all bogus, but I have Canadian documents that was a draft written by our expert in Ottawa that had made inquiries when he was visiting Washington, D.C., and he was told that there was UFOs are real, flying saucers are real. The way they operated was unknown, but a small group headed by a Dr. So-and-so was looking into it. Well, the Dr. So-and-so was Dr. Vannevar Bush, and Vannevar Bush was a scientist who was part of this this group of 12. So it makes sense to me, and it also made sense to this other young researcher in the States whose website is called The Black Vault, and he was able to find a lot of documents because of that single Canadian document. And so Roswell is one of many crashes. There was at least a list of 29 to 30 crashes. I have a document which I've sent to you, which reports crashes of 3 50-foot diameter objects in the early 50s. And it says here, an investigator for the Air Force stated that 3 so-called flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. They were described as being circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. According to Mr. So-and-so informant, the saucers were found in New Mexico due to the fact that the government has a very high-powered radar setup in that area, and it is believed the radar interferes with the controlling mechanism of the saucers.
Wow. So we have proof right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and somehow somebody has been trying to debunk this particular document, but it's a memorandum just like all the other FBI files I managed to purchase. I mean, it's weird. I purchased these documents, like, I think it was out of the 1,600 files, I purchased like 900, which was the available package that they sold to me back in the early to mid-90s. And since then, the FBI website had the same packages, actually all 1,600 files up on their own website. And I thought, okay, well, before anything happens to those documents, I'm going to make sure I copy them onto my website to make them available to people. They're public domain documents. I'm able to sell them no matter what, no matter where they came from, top secret, otherwise, because they're public domain. And I have all 16 packages of those files. I have most of the packages of the British files that were recently released. I have some files from New Zealand, and I have the Canadian documents. Both are microfilm reels, but also I recently got 5,000 JPEGs of 5,000 documents that were scanned off the same reels that I have. So it saved me some work. I'm just trying to find a way to put them in PDF format for easier download. But it's there. The evidence is there, documentary evidence. And I'm hard-pressed to believe that there's been a single documentary that's ever been made on documents. There needs to be one. Usually they make a documentary on UFO videos, sightings, landings, abductions, but I don't think there's been an actual documentary made about documents. And I've talked to a few of the Canadian documentary filmmakers and told them, let me know if you ever want to use my material in some of your documentaries. And there's been some really good documentaries about a particular UFO crash in the 1940s, 1948 in Aztec, New Mexico, but it was done by Paul Kimball of Halifax, and very well done documentary. So it's slowly coming out. Insiders are not so quick to leak it out, but there's been leaks. There's no surprise there. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the evidence is there. You don't believe the naysayers and the debunkers who are saying, oh, you didn't see this, you saw that, you saw this, or there's no evidence. It's there.
Okay. I just want to make sure, Michelle, that we did cover, I was going to ask you, of course, whether or not then, I guess it's obvious the government has hidden the fact that there have been UFO crashes, but we had a photo you'd sent in. I just want to make sure that our viewers saw it, and it was number 17.
Okay.
Did we see that one?
Yeah.
We're good? Tech guy? Yeah, we're all good? Okay, so why do you suppose the government is so, determined to keep this a secret? Is it because of mass panic?
I originally I thought that, and there's still a possibility, well, distinct possibility that'll happen, especially to those who are so dead set against believing that any of this stuff is real. You know, I'm afraid it'll cause an awful lot of heart attacks or whatever if all of a sudden we were to, you know, be inundated with sighting reports and large ships hovering over our cities for weeks on end. But I think the main reason why they're covering it up is because, and I don't think they've been totally successful at doing this, but they've back-engineered technology from UFOs. And that includes transistors, fiber optics, circuit boards, lasers, and some other technologies they found. I know in the 1940s at the Roswell crash, or one of the crashes, they actually found fiber optics. They didn't know what the hell it was. They didn't know you could transfer information from one into the other. But the odd thing about it, it was self-illuminating, and our fiber optics is not like that. You have to have like I've seen things where you buy for your mom and it's like a floral pattern, and you turn it on, you turn the light on, and you see all these little fibers of glass like lighting up in different colors. But so back engineering is one of the main points, and of course is being the supreme, having supremacy in air flight and all that. You want to stay ahead of everybody else. And so it's imperative for them to keep the secrecy going, because in case they make headway in technologies that would benefit them, and of course the one usage that I see them using it for is military use, and which is not necessarily beneficial to everybody. There could be energy sources there that we could use that would do away with fossil fuels, and something that's even longer lasting and possibly less costly than what we're using today. So I think they're determined to keep this secret at all costs. And in the States, unfortunately, people have died as a result of this. People are going to find this pretty shocking, but one of the documents I sent you at number 18 is actually an FBI file, and it concerns Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, see, I always believed she was murdered.
Yeah, well, so was her friend. Actually, in my Celebrities and UFOs page, once that's up, I haven't worked on it yet, I have a nice photo of her. I have a photo of her friend, Dorothy Kilgallen, who was a news reporter, and also Linda Darnell, who was an actress. Now, apparently they all have links to JFK, and basically JFK had told them about the recovered bodies and crash saucers. And because, I guess being together, I guess eventually you need to turn to somebody and tell something. You can't keep this something of this magnitude like bottled up inside forever. So of course you're going to spill the beans to somebody that you trust. And this FBI document is dated the 3rd of August 1962, Marilyn Monroe, and it pretty well indicates that there was a visit by the president at a secret air base for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space. Kilgallen replied that she knew that what might be the source of the visit, and in the mid-50s, Kilgallen, she was something, a secret effort by the U.S. and U.K. government to identify the origins of crashed spacecraft and dead bodies from a British government official. So if they knew that, it was something that they did back then, is they silenced a lot of people. Even one of the members of MJ-12 was thrown out of his hospital window. And basically, it was labeled as a suicide. But I think he was made to shut up because he was going to spill the beans. Because being part of MJ-12, Majestic 12, it must have been weighing on his mind to talk to somebody about what he was involved with. And they soon found a military officer to replace him. And I also have a picture of him on my Majestic 12 page, which I decided to create so that people would be familiarized with the 12 members and why was it put together. But this is another reason why this is kept secret, is because if they've lied to us for so long and people have been killed because of this secrecy, I mean, it would be a shock to the system, and they would lose control. I mean, nobody would want to vote for people like this. I wouldn't want to have them in power. And plus, as I was telling you the other day, I think somehow we've become their servant. The government is supposed to be serving us. We pay their salary by paying taxes. And here, everything is turned around, and we've now become their servant, and they only allow us to know what they want us to know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, you can't, a society will not function indefinitely with that sense, with that way of thinking. You know, we're bound to collapse or to do something even more chaotic if the truth doesn't come out. And it'll come out. If it's not the government itself that will come out and release this information, it'll be forced by more visitations by UFOs. That alone would make people aware and say, holy crap, something's going on. And it's not man-made, and it's not the government, and it's not super secret aircraft. Super secret aircraft, they all have wings. UFOs don't have wings. They don't have propulsion systems that are visible. They don't have vertical tail fins. They don't have, you know, all these things that people don't look at. People that don't know anything about UFOs, they'll say, well, what? You probably saw some super secret aircraft. Well, they're not going to fly those over a populated area.
No.
It sure wasn't what flew over Phoenix, Arizona in '97. It was something that's 2 miles wide. There's no way.
Yeah.
If we had something that big, we wouldn't be using F-18 fighters against our enemies. I remember when I worked as a librarian at Cold Lake Air Force Base in Alberta, where the F-18s are kept, and they were losing pilots because there were fissures in the wings. We can't even build the planes right, and it was because of stresses or whatever. And it's like, you know, so there's an awful lot of reasons for why they want to keep it secret. Panic is part of it, but it's the fact that they've lied to us for so long, and it would knock us off the pyramid. We seem to think we're at the top of the heap, but having these superior beings show themselves in their technology would put us in our place. Yes. And we've grown so accustomed to being what we are as a human species that to have that happen would be such a cultural shock that a lot of people would not ever accept that.
Mm-hmm. No,
you know, and we're going to have to face it one day or the other. If it's not us, our kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids are going to be dealing with this even more.
Yeah, well, eventually, for sure. The truth always comes out eventually.
It does.
So what can you tell us about implants?
Okay, well, implants are, I know there's a lot of jokes about all kinds of implants.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
go into detail those kind of implants.
But the truth of the implants is that a lot of them are placed in areas where if they were to be an attempt made in removing them, it would kill the patient. A lot of implants are found behind the optic nerve. They're not necessarily radiotecs, so they cannot always be detected by X-rays. A lot of them are being found by MRIs, or the person themselves know that something has been implanted when they recall consciously, without the use of hypnosis, their abduction experience. And I sent you 2 pictures of implants that were removed from different people. I think to date there's been 9 or 10 different implants that have been removed. Well, one was removed from a guy's hand, and yet it's funny because there's no entry wounds whatsoever. And unlike an object like a splinter, let's say, you'll have inflammation around the skin, around the area, the immediate area. These things here are almost made to proliferate in the human body because they will not have any inflammation. You might feel the bump, you might feel there's something there. In some cases where the person was unconscious as they were being prepped for an operation to remove the implant, as soon as the implant is removed, the person would sit right up on the table as if the implant was directly connected to the nervous system. Like, it's really, really high tech. And some of the coatings that cover the implants can't be cut through with a scalpel, and a scalpel is the sharpest instrument you can find. And the one doctor, his name is Roger Lear, Dr. Roger Lear. He's a podiatrist, but he actually uses the assistance of an actual surgeon to remove the implants from people that have found out that they've had these implants, and they recall their abduction scenarios and all that. And so there's another piece of evidence there that's been recovered. And these things, whether they send, well, some of them actually send, I wouldn't say radio signals, but they've detected signals coming from them. Whether it's inside the body or outside, I don't remember, but it's really, really funny. And they have these little tiny wires that stick out and connect to the nervous system. And the implants are mostly located in the back of the leg. Like I said, sometimes right in the middle of the brain and behind the optic nerve, which, like I said, if you try to operate on that person, you'll kill the patient because it's something that we can't do. Some implants are inserted through the nasal passages, and they hear a crunch, and it goes up through the bone. And I think it's a monitoring device because in a lot of cases, maybe it registers everything, heart rate, for whatever purpose. And particular people that were abducted in the States, let's say, would travel to America, and they'd be abducted there. And then they travel to Europe, and they'd be abducted there. So how can they be tracked? And these are probably tracking devices as well as multifunctional devices. But they, in some of the TV shows, I guess some certain implants would actually evaporate once they were removed from the patient. But they've recovered these ones, and they've got them under lock and key, and they talk about them. But I find a lot of researchers are not coming out, just out in the open and saying, oh, maybe because they're afraid they might get stolen, and there goes their evidence. But one day it'll all come out, and abductees have already started speaking out. Abductees have made themselves more aware and made other people aware. I mean, even Travis Walton of the famous movie Fire in the Sky is now on the lecture circuit. Not always. He's a very quiet guy. I actually spoke to him 3 times on the phone just before the movie came out in '93 to ask how he was feeling, and he says he was bracing himself for the onslaught because he knew he was going to be attacked by newspapers and debunkers saying that his story was all made up. But he's never fluctuated from his story, and I don't even know. I don't think he's had any implants himself, but there's been a lot of cases where people have found these weird objects, and there's no entry wound, and who knows what they're doing with them. I would hope that they would bring them out and say, see, we have the evidence. But there's not enough of that going around and happening to my satisfaction.
Would you say, for the most part, these abductions are humane?
I would say so. I mean, there's been some reports of, well, initially, I guess, when it happens for the first time, I'm sure being taken against your will is not the favorite thing to have happen, but they all seem to be mostly medical in terms of what parts are under observation. There's close similarity to the animal mutilations, except in the case of the humans, they're not killed. They're just examined, hair samples are taken, semen samples are taken, ova, skin scrapings, like a look over, I guess. And I'm thinking if there's a good possibility. I'm thinking that maybe they've had something to do with tweaking our evolution. Like along the way, they tweaked us, and so maybe that's what gives them the right to abduct us and to see how we're doing, how far along we've come genetically or spiritually or whatever. And but for the most part, these abductions are medical and psychological too. A lot of times they want to see the reaction when people are shown pictures of disasters, atomic bombs, and for whatever purpose, some abductees claim that it's a good message and it's beneficial to all of mankind, and it's to make us aware or something. Nothing really malevolent, but there's been some pain involved. But the aliens are able to take away the pain by just waving their hands over the person or whatever. It's very complex. It's not my area of expertise, but I think it's the central core of why the UFOs are here. I think it's part of the main reason why they're here. If and they need to survive. You know, using our females that do have reproductive organs and whatever, able to raise these fetuses, and so they probably have no choice. And whether they asked us permission or not, maybe they're in such a dire straits where they have to go ahead, like it or not. It's a matter of survival. But at the same time, I think they have more respect for life than we do. I mean, I don't know about their history, but I know for ours. How many millions of people have we killed between World War I and World War II? And we say that we respect life and that we're civilized?
No, yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I would look in the mirror first before saying that these creatures are out to harm us or do something worse or whatever. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's good and evil everywhere, but I'm just happy that so far that if these beings have had wars with other creatures, that their own enemies haven't followed them here. Because we wouldn't stand a chance.
Well, if they're more evolved than we are, perhaps they don't live that kind of life.
Yeah,
maybe there's no violence.
They are. They're more spiritually evolved than we are. It's been told, I've read somewhere, I've seen it in a documentary, that the aliens regard the universe as a supreme being. And they value life more than we do in certain senses. It's different. It's difficult to know because I've never met an alien. I haven't talked to them, and then I was not given all the answers. So it's like it's hard to tell. But like I said before, anybody coming to me and say they have all the answers, I know they're making it up because the aliens are not. It's like give us that technology, and giving us that technology and knowledge would be like giving a handgun to a monkey. I think it would be dangerous. That's why these crashes, I don't think they occur purposely. I think they crash just like we do because they're infallible. They're not perfect beings. Somebody said before, well, maybe they gave us the technology by purposely crashing us. I don't think they're any concept of suicide like we do. So, yeah, I think they know better than to, and I think that's why the military is frustrated and maybe at the same time keeping the secret. I don't think they were able to totally duplicate the technology because it'd be like giving Christopher Columbus a nuclear sub and asking him to reproduce one. First, he'd have to learn what nuclear is all about, how to weld metal together, and even, I don't think they were even at that stage back then in Christopher Columbus's time. They were still using wooden ships. So it's the same thing, and I think the military is still frustrated they haven't cracked the secrets. But the aliens are not stupid. They're not going to give them everything to, because they know damn well we're going to use it for war and to fight off our enemies. And now they want to put weapons in space. For what? It's not for asteroids. And I'm doing my own part to work with Dr. Carol Rosen, who formerly of NASA, who worked under Dr. Werner von Braun, who pretty well appointed her to do a job which is to make sure that they don't weaponize space, because we share space with other cultures, and it's not our right to put weapons in space, no more than it's our right to claim the moon for our property. The moon doesn't belong to us no more than the earth does. We belong to it. And once people are made aware of that, it's a whole new concept. It's a relearning of what we've learned. And it'll take a long time before we even accept that. But we have to be more spiritually evolved to catch up with our technological development. Because we have the technology, but it doesn't mean necessarily that we can handle it. It's like we can produce nuclear power, but we have no efficient way of reducing it back to its basic element where it's not toxic to us, our animals, our plants, or our planet.
Exactly.
Well,
Michelle, we're getting to the end of our show. We've got a few more questions we'd like to ask Michelle, but in the meantime, you can start chatting in your questions. We do have a question ready.
Okay.
What's our question?
Got a couple of questions that came through. One about crop circles. Do they regrow?
Yes, they do.
And the next question was...
the plants themselves, yeah.
And the next question was, does he think Does he think orbs could be the UFOs?
That's a good question.
Or the orbs? Yeah, that's a good possibility. Although probably remotely controlled, because I think there's certain laws in the universe that prevent things from, like certain plateaus that you reach. And I think in evolution or whatever, I have a hard time believing, like, let's say you see a UFO that's the size of a golf ball. I have a very, very hard time believing that there's humanoid life forms in there. Anything that size, I would think, is somehow remotely controlled. It's just like that. Well, before they disbanded the space shuttle program, they had invented this little camera that looked like that little training devices that Luke Skywalker used on Star Wars to practice his lightsaber. So this little spherical camera would actually float. It had different jets and stuff. So an object that size, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think there's certain limits put in place so that you'd have to have a large enough brain to control a device, and if you got something that big, or that small, I should say, I don't think there's a humanoid life form in there. It's probably a remote-controlled TV, sensor, maybe a diviner, a projector, something that projects a pattern that's invisible, and all of a sudden the crop circle lays down. It obviously doesn't go exactly to all the areas where the crop circle is laid down, but it's just fascinating that these objects are very small, but yet obviously some intelligence behind them controlling them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you for your question, and Michelle for your answer. Do we have any more at the moment? Okay, so moving along, what can you tell us about these strange cattle deaths?
Okay, the animal mutilations. American researcher Linda Moulton Howe actually did an excellent documentary called The Strange Harvest in the early 80s. And she, being a science investigator, thought it was some kind of contamination story because she started getting news clippings that her brother was collecting because he worked at an Air Force base, and they had UFO sightings there, and a farmer had brought in a dead cow. And so she started looking into this, and 9 months later she came up with the documentary A Strange Harvest, and it turns out there was a lot of reports by ranchers of hovering UFOs, sometimes even in daylight, where a couple of small creatures were carrying a calf. And the parts that are removed from the cows are similar to what is being observed or looked at by the beings on a human being, but with the animals, the rectum is cored out, an eye is removed, the tongue is removed, the trachea, internal organs are gone. There's little or no blood whatsoever on the animal or the land itself, the area where the animal is found. Sometimes the animal is found in a depression, which seems to indicate that it was dropped from the air. People are saying, well, it's helicopters with a sling that are picking these things up. But if it was the government doing this, the government could buy their own animals and do whatever they're doing to the animals on their own property. They wouldn't be taking, because this is the livelihood of the farmers. They'd be losing like thousands of dollars in animals for whatever reason and leave the whole entire carcass out in the field to just rot. You know, that's a good waste of meat right there. It's too many reports of UFOs before, a few days before, or a few days after the mutilations to just say that it's man-made. I found, actually, I had clippings from the Edmonton Journal. I'd gone out to visit a friend out in Alberta, and I just missed a dozen mutilations by a couple of weeks. And I came back with 3 newspaper articles, and definitely not man-made. They said the mutilations. The RCMP are stumped. And the mutilations occur all the way down from Alberta, all the way down to Colorado, and where the mutilations are taking place, there's nuclear power plants. So I'm thinking that the aliens are monitoring the mutilations to determine how much radiation is being intaked by the animals. And the best way to determine what the levels of radiation would be is by taking the rectal tissue, because that's where it would come out at the end, and they would be able to study, what has been ingested by the animal. And if anybody's reporting military activity, well, it's because the military is monitoring the UFOs, monitoring the mutilations, or actually performing the mutilations. I don't think it's government whatsoever that's doing it. Again, it's for genetic material. It's whatever they're using it for, whether it's for themselves. I'm not sure about if it's to feed themselves. I don't get that impression, but you never know.
I think the radiation
questions
aspect
that
is
are
right.
just leaving it open, but why would they leave the carcass behind?
Exactly.
It just doesn't make any sense. And the animals are totally intact. Even the predators won't even get close. And I've got pictures on my website. One picture is a mutilation, or a lot of mutilation pictures, and then the other one is what it looks like when it's done by a predator. And the bones are spread out all over the place. The animal's not intact. They found some residue on the animal that is sort of metallic. They're not sure what it is. It's like a white powdery substance. And the hemoglobin has been cooked. So whatever instrument is cutting the animals up, first of all, it cuts. The reason why there's no blood, well, either the blood is sucked in or sucked up by another device. It looks like whatever device is cutting through the animal is able to cut between the cells. We can't do that. You cut yourself, you're bleeding. To have an instrument that precise, and it's not a laser, a portable laser done by the military, because this was before the lasers actually. Mutilation report, the more famous one, Snippy the horse, took place in 1967, and the horse's skin was devoid of skin from the neck up, and the rest of the animal was intact. It also happens to wild deer, rabbit. Some people may not like this, but there's been evidence of cats being sliced totally in half, and the second half is gone. I have a cat myself. I mean,
Me too.
Make sure she doesn't go out. But it's unusual. It's definitely related to UFOs, and the questions why, we still don't have any answers, any definite answers.
Wow, that was almost painful to listen to.
Yeah.
My poor cat. We have a question, Michelle.
Okay, I'll start from the top. I have 3 last questions. The first one is, has anyone ever tried to figure out if crop circles have a language in them?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, I think they have, and I think the message lies in the geometry. I'm really bad at math, so I'm not the right person to ask. But I think it's some kind of message. There's some crop circle patterns that one crop circle pattern that I have on my page. It represents. It seems to represent. I don't know if it's just a sign of what could be, but it represents the inner planets. But where the orbit of the Earth is, the Earth is not there. And so I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means that if we keep going the way we are, we're going to be killing ourselves off and killing the planet off. And we have no place else to go.
It's a warning.
It's a warning of some type. Other messages seem to be more towards an opening of the consciousness and be made aware that there's something beyond us. And I think once my personal view on this is that we realize there's something more superior out there, it'll probably, in the long run or in the short run, make us realize that we can no longer live the way we live with the greed, killing each other over for the piece of the action, or, I don't know, all kinds of the things that we do that seem to be going wrong. I think somehow there's a message in there that's telling us that we have more potential than we're willing to, that's far beyond the limitations we put on ourselves.
Oh, I agree with that.
And if we can cross over those limitations, first of all, we have to get along with each other. We can't get along with an alien race and welcome them if we're not even willing to do that with each other.
Maybe that's what they're waiting for.
And that's what they're waiting for. I think we're still in our infancy. We're barely getting out of the crib. we've made our way to space, and for some reason now we have no more shuttle. But I don't think the military is stupid enough to turn their backs. I think there's something else going on. Whether or not they're hitchhiking rides with aliens to go out and explore the galaxy or the universe or whatever, or something else is going on, I have a hard time with that. I got to figure out what's going on there. There's obviously no more shuttle, and we can't keep paying the fortune that they are paying to ride with the Russians. Who knows? But the crop circles are definitely some kind of message. It's up to certain people, hopefully, will be able to have the ability to decipher what it is saying, but some of the stuff is obvious to me. We have to get past our differences and get along with each other, because there's no way we can be humane to an alien being if we can't be humane to each other. And the way we've been doing it with all these wars that are ongoing, it's going to have to come to an end, or else, I don't even know where the point of no return is, but hopefully we haven't reached that yet. And maybe that's what they're trying to tell us, that there's still a chance to change our ways and get better as a society.
If we were to put ourselves in their place, that the higher being was looking down at Earth and watching us like a movie, you're right in saying that we are barbaric.
Yeah, we're a threat to them.
Yeah,
putting weapons in space is going to be would be an act of war. If we were to do that to another enemy or another person, you put military weapons just outside of their border, it's a sign of aggression.
Yes.
And trust me, I don't think that we stand a chance. The military has the best weapon. We have all the radar. They have the radar installations. That's why they can keep the secret too. They have the best technology. You and I can't go out and buy a radar setup, but they can. They have that. So that's why they are able to do maybe not necessarily a perfect job of keeping secrets, because obviously all these documents have come out, but doing what they're doing could cause maybe a race out there to say, these humans don't deserve to join us because they haven't attained the intelligence and the level of humanity that they need to have in order to join our community and be part of whatever amazing things we could share with them.
Exactly.
And putting weapons in space or weapons on the moon or whatever else they were planning way back since the 40s, I mean, we don't stand a chance. I don't care what kind of new weapons the military has. You can only maybe bring down one ship with some kind of pulse device, but there could be 50 other ships that will make it down and do whatever. I don't think they're like that, though. I think they're more benevolent than malevolent. All seem to indicate that, because otherwise we would have been taken over a long time ago. Either today or when we're even less weaponized. So
I believe that too.
There's definitely a message in the crop circles, and hopefully we can decipher it on time to say, well, okay. But like I said, maybe the beginning of the change of consciousness and mindset will start this year, this famous 2012 everybody's talking about, because the Chinese calendar is supposedly stopping, or I keep saying maybe the poor guy just ran out of rock.
That's what I say.
He had carpal tunnel.
That's what I say. Maybe he just got tired, for Pete's sake. Maybe it's like, I'm just...
You couldn't continue to carve the calendar for a lifetime.
No.
That's ridiculous.
No,
so maybe that's all it is. It's nobody's ever mentioned that before, and it's like, my God, man, if we lost... It's nice to be open-minded, but not to the point where your brain's going to fall out.
Well, we actually did do a show. One of our first shows actually was the Mayan calendar, and it was about, December 12, 2012, or 21, and we were talking about just that, it's, the guy probably just got tired or said enough's enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've gone really late tonight. I just want to thank our viewers who have hung in there and watched our show. It was so great having you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
And we do have another question, though, before we say goodnight. We have a few questions. Okay.
Okay,
I'll make these quick. I'm going to combine them together.
Okay.
Because they kind of relate to each other. Okay, the first question is... Sorry, I have to go back a bit. Do you think humans can channel an alien?
No. No. No.
So that's no.
That's a no. And then the last question we have, and somebody's asked this a few times, so I've kind of put it off until now, but they asked you what religion you are, or if you believe in God, or do you feel that maybe aliens are a god?
Yeah, I'm Catholic, but I'm not practicing Catholic anymore. Opening my eyes to this it's not destroyed my faith in God, because I'm now considered, finally there's a term for it, ancient astronaut theorist, because I watch Ancient Aliens, and to put in the context of what I'm into, UFOs and stuff, I think it makes more sense that there were ancient visitors from way back when that came down and taught us how to grow food and all that stuff than to just say, oh, it's just some invisible God who just came and gave us, with his mystical powers, and just appeared, created the earth in 7 days, and, and if you were to go strictly by the Bible, apparently our existence has only been 10,000 years. Well, it doesn't explain the dinosaurs 65 million years further back. So it's changed my views, but it's made me more realize that the universe is more magnificent than it is, and that there's beings out there that obviously are capable of not creating life, but tweaking it, and there is a God. I believe there's a universe. I've seen evidence of power of prayer and all that, but I think that it's a lot more mysterious than what we're led to believe, and the Bible doesn't have all the answers, but it's part of it.
That was beautifully put, and I agree with that too. So,
I tend to go with the aliens and say, okay, I regard the universe as being a supreme being. That the universe flows, there's chaos, but yet everything seems to be like the human body. All the cells are circular, just like in the universe, all the planets are circular. Everything's in motion. Everything works like clockwork. And planets that die, there's stars that die, and stars that are born, and planets that are born. So it's continuous. It's probably been there way before whatever the Big Bang, and it'll continue to be there long after we've transited to something else. We are a spiritual being living the human experience. Once our bodies die, our energy goes elsewhere.
mm-hmm. For sure.
And, yeah, those are my beliefs. And I believe that Jesus was one of theirs. I believe the Virgin Mary was artificially inseminated, because in the depiction of the manger, there's always an object above that shines the light down, and it's not the Star of Bethlehem. The Star of Bethlehem was actually a UFO because it was seen twice in the same day. The three kings followed it until it became stationary over the manger.
Mm-hmm.
That was another biblical reference that I wanted to touch upon. And my mom has she has a master's degree in theology, and we've kind of clashed on that before, but I think when you put all this stuff in the context of UFOs and visitations by supreme beings, and the native people will tell you the same thing, the sky people, it's in their folklore. Every ancient civilizations, they all claim that their gods came from above. Every single one of them. And why would you have pyramids spawning not only in Egypt, but you have pyramids in South America, in Latin America, and I think there's a pyramid in China. I'm not sure in Mongolia, and without having the ability to fly, what kind of connection do they have? There's all these unanswered questions about these ancient civilizations, and now we're finding structures under the ocean that obviously at one time they were on the surface. Who built them?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of questions and not enough answers, personally.
Yeah.
So
more and more years of research.
God forbid. Yeah.
So do we have
But
any...
I've had to sacrifice an awful lot. I've never been married. I've dated very few. It's my passion, and sometimes it sucks. But it's there. It brings me back. If it's not that, it's a new documentary or something that will bring me back when I feel down and I feel, you know what, well, I'm taking this on. It's such a momentous, monumental, achievement or project. It's just, but
It sounds like your divine path, and it sounds like what you were meant to do.
I think it's my destiny. I'm just along for the ride. That's the way I see it. It's not me that picked it. I think it picked me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but that's what it feels like sometimes.
Well, I'm glad we picked you for the show. So
You can have me back anytime.
Oh, that's great. We had an amazing time tonight, Michelle. For those of you who've stayed with us all night, thank you so much. And Michelle, could you tell them one more time how to reach you?
Okay, my website is www.newforce.com. Newforce stands for Northern Ontario UFO Research and Study. N as in Normand, O, U, F as in Frank, O, R as in Research, and S as in Study.com. And just click on my name if you see it in blue, and you can email me right straight from there.
Okay, well, stay with us, Michelle. I'm just going to say goodnight to our viewers. Thanks so much for joining us. Next week we have Jennifer Lyle coming on from Your Soul Connection, and that's going to be a great show, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Wednesday evening. Have a great night, everybody.